Finally joining y'all tonight. Sorry for the delay. You know, it's the day before tax day here in the U.S. So, yeah, had a little last minute tax work had to get done. So, hopefully, there's a couple of you all on, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Taxila Coil, and we're going to display some of the role playing game elements that we've worked through and created. So, hopefully, it's educational to you guys. So we'll see how this is all going. Looks like the feed is going out good. If everyone can hear me and it's and the audio is good, then that's what we're looking for. All right. So let me talk a little bit and bring up some documentation to talk about where we are as a rule set. So there's a lot of different stuff goes into trying to build a 40K kind of role playing game. There's obviously a couple different ways to do it. If you look at Heretic Hunt, they're using Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, and they're doing a pretty good job with it because it seems to fit what they want to do with Heretic Hunt. And you can go find them on YouTube. It's pretty cool to watch, but it's very D&D adjacent because all the rules and all the components are taken straight out of that. So it feels comfortable to people. There's also a couple other rule sets out there. There's Wrath and Glory from Cubicle 7, and that's definitely a combat focused game. But if anyone's ever looked at that rule set, and I guess I should bring up some of these rule sets to talk about them. Let's see, where did I hide all my Wrath and Glory stuff? Let's see here in all of my personal gaming archives. All right. So let's see here. Wrath and Glory. I say I have it here, and I'm looking right at it. Okay. Let's see which one I'll. Nope. That's actually one of the adventures. They've got a lot of cool adventures. Um, if you have never looked at any of their stuff, there's a lot of cool things that are in the Wrath and Glory. All right, let's see here. There we go. There's our core rulebook. Let's bring that up. I say let's bring that up like it's going to happen quickly. All right. So there's Wrath and Glory, and that's a pretty cool set. It, like I said, it's combat focused. It's designed to be done for mixed parties. Not all Space Marines, not all Rogue Traders, not all Xenos. Although there are a few all Xenos adventures out now for it. But the cool thing is you can kind of create these mixed parties out of all the different kinds of things. And so you see they're different tiers. You've got some very, intro level kind of people. You've got, Space Marine scouts in there. You've got Inquisitors. You've got Tier 4, the Primaris Intercessor. Yes, if somebody shows up as a Primaris Space Marine, you're Tier 4, you're top of the game there. But it's designed to do combat. But it's also super grim dark, which is cool. And if you look at some of the adventures that are out there, they offer everything from inquisitorial adventures to Xenos-based adventures to even some vehicle-based adventures. Now let's see if I can find it here. There you go, Church of Steel. So Church of Steel is a cool expansion. Church of Steel is Wrath and Glory for vehicle crews. So you could do a lot of cool things in there. And that kind of was what naturally some people had kind of suggested to us and said, hey, think about Wrath and Glory because you can do all these different categories of vehicles. And there's rules for how the vehicles work, how occupants work inside the vehicles, and the vehicle's machine spirits tend to work. But the problem is when you scroll down here and you really look at it, it's not necessarily built to plug into something like Aeronautica Imperialis. So you've got some AI aircraft in there. You've got Aquila Landers, Arvis Lighters, the venerable Vulture gunship. So yes, Pinka could have her gunship in there. And you got Valkyries in there as well. So it's got some of the things, but the point of the vehicle rules is really to deliver player characters to a location and have them do cool things once they get there. Not necessarily what you do in Aeronautica Imperialis. Although we'll talk about the whole concept of delivering player characters somewhere and having them do cool stuff, because that comes up time and time again. But there are some cool rules you could always pull out of here. As you go through all the different categories of vehicles, yeah, they've got everything from Necron vehicles, Chaos vehicles, Eldar vehicles. Some of them are definitely less transporty, more killer. So they've got Nightshade Interceptors, they've got Hemlock Wraith Fighters. But at the end of the day, it's not so geared towards vehicle on vehicle kind of hardcore combat like Aeronautica Imperialis is. Um, but the cool thing is it's got all kinds of weapons. So I scroll down here just to show you all the different kind of weapons and rules for what they've got. So it's cool if you've got characters attacking vehicles, vehicles attacking characters, all those things. And then when you go back up, let's see if I can find it here. Um, there are here's all the vehicle history. So this gets kind of funny. So let's go back and let's look at a couple of categories of imperial machines you can have here. Let's go up here. Where does it start? I think it starts with Inquisitorial. Nope, starts with Mechanicus. But you roll 2d6 and you can create what their past engagements are. And so that gives you a little bit of background for your vehicle, any marks of honor, things that are unique to the vehicle, their quirks and customizations. And some of those get to be pretty funny when you get down to like some of the independent machines quirks and customizations. Yes, they could have an entertainment center. Uh, you know, the luxuriously appointed, aged and infirm. A drinks cabinet. Vehicle contains numerous expensive bottles of Amasek and Zlatov. Yeah, so that's not exactly what you're looking for in an AI campaign, but it is something you could do. So we kind of passed on Wrath and Glory, although we may return back to Wrath and Glory at some point in the campaign to do some cool things, just because it wasn't really geared towards the vehicle parts of Aeronautica Imperialis. So, what else do we have out there? Oop, let's not talk about that yet. We'll talk about those guys later. So the other thing that was out there's a fan-made series of rules, Aeronautica version 1.3, and this is out on Facebook in the Aeronautica 2019 Facebook group, as well as on our website at Lead Pursuit. But what this was a fan-made rule set that was really targeted to get into the Aeronautica rule set and to plug straight into it. So the real quick overview is it was created to have three abilities for all your characters: faith, fury, and talent. And you can use those abilities in and out of the cockpit as the game master sees fit. But they have some very basic injury rules. They have some very basic initiative rules that are slightly different than what you're used to. They also have detailed rules for shoot downs. So, because it is designed to plug into Aeronautica Imperialis, the goal is twofold: to allow player characters to live longer and to live with character, and then die gloriously when they finally fail. But the shoot downs basically allows the aircraft for player characters to lose all of its structure points, and then each of these flavorful damages will break in there. Brett joined us. See, at least I could shame Brett to rolling in and seeing what's going on. But the cool thing is when you get down there to 0 structure points, which Brett's Eldar are common at, then you start rolling and you start adding in all these other flavorful damages. So if you were watching one of our episodes, you saw that there was I believe it was a hull hit. Yeah, a hull hit of wing cripple. No, it wasn't wing crippled. It was, loss of control surfaces. So one of our Vulture gunships was no longer allowed to turn left. So it was definitely very characterful, as it had to turn right the whole time to shoot everybody. Um, but like a lot of different things in the game. Some of them are pretty cool. Some of them are kind of frustrating. Wing crippled. Yeah, sucks that you enter a spin. I think I've spun too many aircraft down into the dirt in Aeronautica Imperialis. But you can also have engine hits, things that cause you to lose thrust and throttle, and then obviously cockpit hits. So it gives a little bit of flavor to where otherwise you would lose aircraft and your player characters would go spinning into the dirt and have no no more interactions. The other thing they changed up here is you look at initiative. They've really shifted how the initiative works. So rather than just rolling a d6, and if you had multiple players, figuring out either which order you go around the table or who rolled higher versus who rolled lower, everybody takes and rolls a d10, and player characters add their talent to it. So what it guarantees is player characters will go last, so they can move last, but they can shoot last. But what happens if you want to shoot first and move first? Well, player characters can preempt. You can always choose at the beginning of a turn to move at a lower initiative step than what you're doing. So you can preempt as a player character and say, I want to move and shoot before the Tau in this case. So what that allows you to do is you can interrupt the initiative sequence during the tailing fire maneuver sequence, and then you now activate after that currently activated model. So I shouldn't say it doesn't allow you to preempt, it allows you to interrupt. Because you fall after the activated model. So what's really cool is if you have one of your NPCs going first, then you can jump in and you can preempt the enemy. But anyway, you permanently move to that new lower. So if you shoot first, you then get to, or if you move first, then you get to shoot first. And also everything happens as flights. So when you move all of the bad guys, or when you move all of your thunderbolts that are your NPCs, they all activate together. And so instead of moving and alternating and doing things like that, an example was whenever we would have combined Tau flights, they would have one initiative die roll. If they had like the Manta and some Barracudas, then they'd roll two different die rolls because your initiative for your big, ugly Manta mothership would go at a different time than the fighters out there. So that would add a little bit of play into it. And the same thing happens when you have NPC organizations. So if you like bring in extra vulture gunships or you bring in extra thunderbolts, they will roll as a flight separately from what your player characters roll as, which kind of makes it cool. Brett, I know you're dying to ask a question since you're now into the stream. Or anyone else who's in the stream, feel free to drop us some questions as I go along. Feel free to interrupt, ask anything you want. We'll just be walking through a couple of these rule sets. All right, so the real question becomes, why this Aeronautica rule set? What else does it allow you to do? Well, it also throws in there a bunch of skills and upgrades, which the campaign system that GW has in the compendium, it does some of those. In the campaign systems they've got in the various campaign books, they do some things like this, but this is much more detailed and built to plug in with this rule set and to use the abilities of faith, fury, and talent. Now, let's go back to those abilities real quick. Faith, obviously, is something you would roll against to test when people are injured or frightened or have to make a morale check. You could roll against Fury if it's sometimes for a morale check to see if they don't lose their cool. Sometimes to see if they can react well to a stressful situation, you could use Fury. And then Talent is kind of a catch-all for anything they're supposed to be able to already do. Such as using technology, flying the airplane. You know, Fury can also be used if you're doing any kind of fighting, simulating any hand-to-hand fighting or whatever that's outside the rule set. But anything physical would go under Fury, as you see there. So there's how it breaks down those three skill tests. Primarily, you just roll a d10 and roll underneath those abilities. If for whatever reason you want to roll a contested kind of set up there, you then would roll a d10 and add the characteristic of that player. That also requires you to create these skill levels for NPCs if you think they're going to have that interaction with a player, which is fine. Actually, most of our NPCs in the game, other than the Tau, I have created skill levels and everything for them, so that way, or sorry, ability levels, their attributes, to see if the players want to make an opposed roll, what they can do. Okay, let's go back down to having talked about those. Let's talk about the skills. So you get experience points in every game, just like any other role playing game. You would get one experience point for completing a mission, whether you're shot down or not, surviving. You might get two experience points if it's an especially dangerous or important mission. You could also get extra experience points for shooting down the most enemy aircraft or ground targets, destroying those. So you could get somewhere between 1 to 3 experience points for a mission. And you can always get GM awarded XP if you do something impressive, like shooting down the Tau Manta. So that's why we threw an extra point out there to Pinka. But that gets you a number of experience points for each game. So what you can do, and we can scroll down here, you can obviously increase your abilities, and it's tiered. In my experience, 3 XP may not be enough of a step up. We already have one guy that has burned through all these levels and now has a talent of 8. So that's useful because he's our Adeptus Mechanicus guy, but it's not necessarily where we want to be. You don't want people passing all of their rolls. But what you do now is you can take a look at the different tiers and see how many experience points you have to pay to buy your way through these tiers. And there's usually a requirement. So, like for Ace Pilot, you have to have 5 kills. To buy into tier 2, you have to have 10 kills, and then you spend your 2 XP. And that allows you to do some weird things here, chaining maneuvers, stuff like that. That's really good if you're a fast airplane, not so good if you're slow. But then there's some of them that don't have any kill requirements. They have skill requirements. So like this one requires a talent of 5. This one requires a talent of 6, 7 to go up each of the levels. Some of them are combined, 5 talent, 5 faith. So you have to have leveled up in those ways. And some of them, are once again, like we saw the other ones, single-handed ones, single skilled ones. So there's cool things you can do there. You can step up. I've used this one. I've used Guardian Angel. So one of my NPCs, you've seen Gyro probably in this last game. 2 games ago when we were at Adepticon, she used Guardian Angel and she used Righteous Fury. She has 2 skills. She used Guardian Angel, and she had Guardian Angel. No, sorry, she used Wingman. She had Wingman 1, and so she basically allowed them to re-roll ones on all rolls to hit of that round. So that helped her wingman out trying to shoot at the Manta. And then she used Righteous Fury when she was trying to close in on the Manta herself. So I've gotta answer the random texts from the team. uh, I just laugh. You can never put your phone down. All right. So those are the skills that you can pick up. You can, of course, pick up ace abilities. And a lot of these are just the same ones that are out of the GW campaign rules. So every 5 kills, you can spend 1 XP and you can purchase one of these ace abilities. So it isn't too bad if your pilots in this rule system are acquiring a lot of skills. That's really good. They're burning XP. If you are where I am, suddenly guys have burned a lot of XP to get their talent up, and so now they're not failing a lot of die rolls, but they don't have a whole lot of experience. But it is pretty funny when you say, "Hey, make a talent check," and they easily pass it. Um, So that's kind of where I am with that, with our one Mechanicum player. But that's fine. I'll just have to come up with more creative, negatively bonused uh, things. So he'll have a minus because he's working with a tech adept instead of working with another Mechanicum. But anyway, so that's the rules for Aeronautica version 1.3. So thanks to the community for throwing that all out there. Super cool set of rules. Are there some things that changed? Sure. Yeah. What player out there would not want to change the rules they've been playing with? I think it's definitely a case of it's a 90% solution. It's got a lot of the things that we want to be able to do in the rules, and it then allows you to do some cool RPG and adventuring outside of it. Brett, you're not a noob. Tailing Fire. So Tailing Fire in Aeronautica is different than Blood Red Skies. Tailing fire is when you end up in the rear arc of an enemy fighter at either short or medium range, and then the next turn, after everyone's placed their orders, everyone's rolled for initiative, then the tailing fire happens. So that's how in the next to last episode, Pinka, Miriam, shot down the Manta. She had tailing fire, so she shot all of her dice during the regular turn, did not kill the Manta. It still had 2 hits left. And so she then was allowed to shoot again with her tailing fire, rolled her dice, had 4 hits. 2 of those she rolled first, and they were misses, did no damage, and then she rolled the last 2, and they got damage that way. So it shot it down. Um, yeah, so that's exactly that's you saw that at Adepticon. That's how Miriam got her shoot down. So tailing fire is super cool. Having abilities that work on top of tailing fire also cool, and abilities that have you work with your wingman is also pretty cool. So it doesn't necessarily specify in the rules whether your wingman is another member of the party, or can you have NPC wingmen? We kind of play this the same way that you would play D&D or any one of those games. Absolutely, you've got your equivalent of your hirelings, which are the in this case they're the other squadron members of your particular aircraft type. So whenever Pinka goes into combat in a vulture, she brings along an NPC wingman. Same thing for all of our all of our characters except for our Adeptus Mechanicus and our AWACS. So they don't get wingmen, those poor guys. All right, well, let's talk about one of the other RPG elements that we've put into the game. So there's a lot that we've talked about with custom aircraft because once again, what's the fun of playing a role-playing game if you never tweak anything and if you feel like you're playing it, inside the boundaries of the rules of Aeronautica Imperialis? So we've created a couple different aircraft that are one-offs that aren't necessarily GW approved, but who cares? And they kind of pigeonhole members of the party into standard role-playing game roles. So they put them either into the role of the tank, the role of one of the casters, one of the support characters, a lot of different things there. And the first way we did this, much to Connor's chagrin, was with the Marauder Princeps. So he'd said, hey, would love to always build one of those Marauder AWACSs. So we made kind of a customized one and built some stat lines for that. So it looks a lot like a regular Marauder out there, except only has the heavy bolter array and the rear turret. No bomb bay. He's fond of illegally taking missiles, and I've beat him up about that. But he takes missiles much like the other Marauders do. But we gave it the special rule of Battle Captain. So what does Battle Captain do? Whoops, scrolling too fast. So Battle Captain allows him to do a couple things during the turn that are not kinetic. The first one is command and control. So when he's activated, he can choose another aircraft that has yet to move this round, and then they can change their ace maneuver. Super cool, especially if, like you saw in the Adepticon episode, when you're Miriam and you have chosen the wrong maneuver, and you realize that after the Tau move, and you go, oops, that didn't work out. So you could then use that ability, and they pick a new maneuver. New Spheric Deception. So personally one of my favorites. When you activate in the firing phase, all of a sudden you pick a friendly aircraft within 4 hexes, place a token on it, and when an enemy aircraft fires at that aircraft, they have to re-roll any hit rolls of a natural 6. So not boosted to 6 with any bonuses, but a natural 6. And that goes all the way through the next turn's tailing fire phase. So as long as you hang out within 4 hexes of that aircraft, other aircraft have a hard time hitting it. Not ground sites, but other aircraft. And then the last one, one that we saw in several of the first episodes, but haven't seen in a while. When the Marauder Princeps activates in the firing phase, the controlling player chooses one enemy ground site or target within 10 hexes and places a token on it. All friendly aircraft attacking the site can re-roll 1 2-hit die per weapon attack. So basically marking a target for them, steering everyone into that target. So that's kind of a fun one. Okay. So why did we do this? Well, once again, I wanted to keep Connor from being arguably the best player of our group, I didn't want to be the tank, and he didn't want to be the tank. So what did we do? We did a little bit of role playing tie-in and kind of constrained him to an aircraft that, while it can defend itself, and arguably he has quite a few kills as the Marauder, as the AWACS, but it forces him into a role that is much more supporting, much less the primary killer out there and the person who's supposed to help, which does not also mean that he doesn't roll in behind Tau and kill things, which is pretty funny. But the purpose of it is to push him kind of into that caster support role, which in this case it's worked out well a couple times. None of the abilities have seemed too super overpowered. So the first thing I'll say to any GM who wants to play an Aeronautica Imperialis game is think ahead to when your players want to do something cool with their aircraft. So these are some cool abilities we gave them from the start, but then the question will always come up of, hey, what if I get my local tech marine or engine seer or somebody to modify the aircraft? Because you may or may not have a character playing the Mechanicum in or the Adeptus Mechanicus. Sorry, we're 40K here. Adeptus Mechanicus in your party. So think early on how you want them to modify their aircraft and how you want to either make it a series of talent rolls or a series of experiential things, such that you have to expend experience points to know how you would use that upgrade and then be able to make talent checks or find some other in-game economy to do it. We have an Adeptus Mechanicus in our party, which, while it is both liberating and frustrating, has also been pretty funny at times, such as the last episode where he's been trying to figure out how to slow down faster than the poor Valkyrie's throttle of one. So I am a huge believer in game masters taking their players literally when he asked me if he could rig a way to slow his aircraft down. And he worked with one of his other engine seers, one of his other Adeptus Mechanicus individuals, a tech adept Solon, who, if you haven't watched the show, is not exactly the brightest Adeptus Mechanicus NPC. He's very dutiful and great mechanical and electronic knowledge, not the sharpest tool in the shed. So he pretty much left Solon alone to find a way to modify his aircraft to slow down rapidly. And having never tested it before the mission, he chose to test it in the middle of the mission. So I had him roll his talent check, which he gloriously failed, and went from speed 4 to speed 0 in an instant. But all humor aside, it was a good moment to kind of work through with the players. Hey, okay, you want to do something cool. Don't assume I'm just going to give it to you. You gotta think about this logically and try things before you try them out in combat. But it was funny, and it managed to allow him to suddenly sit there and hover and shoot at a number of the bad guys, even though he about G-locked himself and passed out from slowing from 4 to 0. Likewise, the other thing to think about is as a GM, because you have modified aircraft or you have people doing things that may push the boundaries of the rule set. So if you look at the rules for and I'll bring it up here because I happen to have a copy. If you look at the rules for Aeronautica Imperialis, there is very hard and fast rules about how you accelerate, how you decelerate, how you end up getting into a spin, all of those different things. Be prepared to break those. And once again, like any good role-playing game, have a way to role-play breaking those rules and what you choose to do when the player decides they want to break those rules. So I'll bring up one of the things here from AI. Let's go back to the rules. Actually, let's go to campaigns because I always like looking at the GW campaign books. Let's pull it out of Taros because we are talking about fighting the Tau. Okay, so one of my favorite things that we've gone through is the interaction of aircraft speed and the interaction of throttles, and then unintentional player moves, such as, let's see if I can find it here. Yeah. Breaking up. Should you ever attempt to exceed your max speed for any reason, including player error, rolling the breakup dies. So I think it's one of those cool opportunities that we've changed the rules a little bit. We have basically said you can try to break any of the rules by 1 point. Fly too fast by one, speed up or slow down by an extra throttle. You can do that, and then you got to make a talent check. So if you pass the talent check, you're fine. You're good. If you fail the talent check, then now you're on for Mr. Toad's wild ride, as we used to say in aviation. So it's a point where all of a sudden you now have to make a handling check. And I walk the players through if they pass that, if they failed their talent check, passed their handling check. What is the damage to the aircraft as it has managed to stay in control, even when you try to do something stupid. But the other um, part of that is what happens when they actually depart control flight, where they fail the handling check. Then do they enter spins? Do they stall? All those things I leave up to you as the GM. Should you be doing an AI campaign? But I am not afraid to throw my characters into a spin and see them eject out of a perfectly good aircraft. We ran into a little bit of a problem this last time because the rule Pinka, Miriam as Pinka, was trying to brake, was decelerating too fast and going basically to speed one or to speed zero without any system or augmentation like her Adeptus Mechanicus counterpart had. But I really couldn't stall her because theoretically a speed zero aircraft doesn't stall because it can go speed zero. And I didn't want to throw her directly into a spin because she was right overhead the terrain and she would have impacted it immediately the next turn. So we're in a weird situation where she basically got to get away with it for free, but it pushed her off the terrain, dropped her in altitude, and then took her to speed zero, basically saying, by the good graces of your GM, you would have hit the ground. But be prepared for things like that because players will want to bend the rules. Players will want to outright break the rules. Have in your hip pocket how you're going to react because this is now a role playing game, not a war game. The rules are not hard and fast. The rules are, in fact, there to be a guide. I always go back to the infamous Gary Gygax quote of, it'll be a terrible day if they realize that they don't need rules to do role playing. It's one of those things that, be prepared for them to do it, kind of corral people to not just ask for crazy things. But if they want to push the boundaries, have a mechanic in place. And thankfully, the Aeronautica version 1.3 rules gives us that mechanic with the talent check. Now, all of a sudden, talent checks are easier for my Adeptus Mechanicus guy, not his talent 8. That's fine. Everybody else keeps failing theirs too. So, all right. So one of the other things to think about as you go through this is how do you balance the encounters? AI is a very points-based war game, being a GW product, and everything is quote unquote supposed to be balanced. But we know that it's not. So we know that inside of GW systems, especially in Aeronautica, especially with some of the Xenos races like the Necrons, it is far from balanced, but it's still fun. But what I do is I'll go in and I'll take a look at the point values of the aircraft that the characters are currently configured at. And then I basically give them that level of aircraft maximum in one turn that will oppose them. That doesn't mean that I won't have a wagon train of bad dudes and dudettes coming their way, as you've seen in a couple of them where you have multiple Barracudas, multiple drones, Remora drones, Tiger Sharks, all coming their way. But I try to make sure that on the board, I never have more than the points value they're currently at. So what that allows me to do is to not get them overwhelmed where they're suddenly all taking damage, suddenly unable to equal the enemy forces, force on force. But with the Barracuda and other aircraft points value wise, they can usually kill them fairly quick. We have overmatched them before. I did throw a Tiger Shark out there once and they rolled poorly. But to be honest, points wise, they were well above it. They should have killed it. Because if you look, even the big Tiger Shark is 28, and by the time you throw additional weapons on there, isn't that tremendously killer. And 2 Vulture gunships alone is 40 points. Not to mention how many other aircraft they had in the area that could have shot at it. But player characters will be player characters. The dice will desert them, and they'll find themselves at some point on the wrong end of the stick, which is where the shoot down rules are for. So don't be afraid to have the players take damage. I think we taught a valuable lesson early on with Miriam's character, Pinka, that yes, you can get shot down, and there are penalties for getting shot down. For me, there's always a story there. I guess I equate it to much like any player character needing to be resurrected, restored, reincarnated, any one of those things, depending upon your game system, when bad things happen to player characters. There should be some penalty or some, as I'll call, penance that they have to do to get their character back. I was not, as much as Miriam accuses me, I was not going to kill Pinka, but I was going to make her roll a heck of a lot of dice, as everyone else was doing the adventuring. To that was her penance for flying poorly and rolling poorly. But the other player characters had their share in it. They had to basically fly down a canyon. They had to go through some maneuvers to make sure they weren't going to hit any of the walls, which was a little tricky because they were kind of boxed in between the canyons and the aircraft that was leading them down, and they didn't want to hit that aircraft either. So it was a challenge for people to plot out their maneuvers and do some basic aeronautica gamesmanship, and then to keep Pinka's interest between having the chirurgeon surgeons, the EMTs on the airplane rolling their talent checks, and then her having to roll faith or fury checks depending upon how far she got into dying. And then, of course, you reward them when they get there and they accomplish everything and they get their character back a couple episodes later. But it makes for an interesting part of the player character piece because now they're a little bit more cautious about flying directly into the teeth of a barracuda. Well, not say of a barracuda, of a tiger shark or anything big, because they've learned their lesson and they don't want to spend another episode getting their character back and going through that drama. So there's a little bit of a lesson to teach the players there. Make it fun, make it narrative, but also do not feel too bad when you make it painful for them to go through to get their character. But once again, then you can take the point values. The max I generally put into a scenario is 200%, because I figure if the players are doing rolling the dice well, they can then be able to shoot down twice as many aircraft as they have points values if those are staggered. So that's some of the planning that goes in there. And then I don't generally worry about point values for ground sites. I always laugh at the Tau ground sites. They're fun. These the Skyfire platforms sometimes seem a little scary, and I think we finally did some hits against them, but they're basically ground-mounted burst cannons. The Storm Furies have been thoroughly useless every time I've tried to hit somebody and kill somebody with them, but they are railguns, so they do have a damage of 2 plus, 6 plus. So that extra damage does hurt, especially when a number of the player characters have 2 damage aircraft. So, all right. So let's go back to the other aircraft. So one of the other things is when you're playing most role-playing games, uh, part of the flair is the NPCs. It's if you're doing something like Dungeons and Dragons, it's what's the equipment of the NPCs, what are their classes, how do they interact with the party, what do they bring to either a fight or to a negotiation or spells to heal the party. What are the purpose of these other NPCs they run across that they kind of partner up with? Well, thinking about that, it sure would have been boring if their equipment was the exact same as the player characters. Not wanting to totally break the rules too much, but I wanted to have the NPCs aircraft feel different, even if their stat lines were almost the same. So one of the aircraft that we then went with was the Pterodon, which basically is a Thunderbolt that had different models for. There were some really cool models that I got off Colts 3D. I can bring that up later and show you all where I found some of those things because I have a ton of Aeronautica models in my Colts 3D folder now. But I went out there and bought a couple models from a couple different model creators out there. But the Pterodon itself was cool. Had a very much secret weapons of the Luftwaffe look, big old HE-111 kind of wing, and it's been a lot of fun to put into the game. The the interesting part of all of this uh, with the pterodon is even though it flies and acts like a thunderbolt with a NPC at the helm, it now has the ability to survive a lot of stuff. Oh, and I guess my volume is a little low. All right, well, we'll crank the volume up some more. All right, thank you, Brett. I'm not paying attention to the messages that everyone's sending me. So let's boost the volume. I say that quickly. Yeah, I was going to boost the volume, and I don't know why. Let's try this. Let's try the infamous mic switch on the back. See if I can boost it with that. Okay, hopefully that's coming up a little bit, not much. I guess I'll have to. What if I can set? All right, hopefully that's a little bit better. And I'll try to speak more into the mic, and that will get us what we need. Okay, so going back to the pterodon, one of the cool parts about taking it directly as another Thunderbolt was I had to add a little bit of flavor to it. So I added rocket boosters, partially because when you go read through Dan Abnett's very infamous Double Eagle, which I absolutely loathed almost all the way to the end. The end was not bad, but the uh, the one cool thing they talk about is that they couldn't use their rocket boosters to gain altitude or to escape a fight in the Thunderbolt. It was only for takeoff. So I said, what if the local militia, their aircraft had the ability to use the rocket boosters to either disengage or, as we've seen narratively, to be used a couple times to get to the fight faster. Because we'll talk about problems you give player characters in Aeronautica. If you have everything as the same dogfight, it's probably going to be a boring campaign. It would be much like a dungeon crawl with all the same enemies in every room, and all you did was hack and slash. Oh wait, that was what we did in the 70s and 80s for Dungeons and Dragons. Anyway, but the purpose was to give the Pterodon a little bit more of a narrative flavor, and in doing so, it's been interesting to use the NPC, Captain Tieg, call sign Gyro, using her aircraft to show up late to the fight, use their rocket boosters to get there and influence the fight when the player characters are running out of options, running out of ammo, and running out of structure on their aircraft. So she kind of makes for an interesting Deus ex machina, if you are a literary nerd, that she gets to show up and bring two more aircraft or more into the fight. That kind of helps tip the scales in the players, um, towards the players. Now, against the Manta at Adepticon, we rolled Gyro out there in the main part of the fight. Gyro barely survived. Gyro's wingman got shot down by one of the Remora drones, but was still kind of a key part of the fight because the poor Imperial Thunderbolts got absolutely steamrolled by the Manta, and three out of four of those were lost. So when you start doing NPCs, think about what their aircraft are going to be like, and you can pick just standard Imperial aircraft. You don't have to go full on something strange and non-standard. You could make it a Thunderbolt, but you could change some of the abilities. You could give it an ace ability out of the campaign systems. You could give it any one of the upgrades, or you could make one of the upgrades even stronger. So you could give it, -2 to be hit. So it's very difficult for the enemy to lock onto it. It's stealthier than a Remora drone. Who knows why? Some crazy old Mechanicum technology. But things like that will add some narrative flavor, and it gives a reason for the character to be there, which is what I guess I'll come back to on some of these, is that there should be a reason for, in AI, every one of your NPCs to show up. I know at some point, I think our Adeptus Mechanicus player, so we'll try to get this right, Engine Seer Adept Murdoch, also known as Doc Brown, in his human name. But he's keeping this running tab of all these people he's run into. Some of them seem to not be very useful yet, but most of them have had direct play in what his aircraft does outside of the game. Because once again, when the Adeptus Mechanicus guy shows up in the game, there's not much he's doing other than repairing stuff, breaking stuff, or shooting things. So his character is sort of a healer type character that gets thrown into the game, and he's able to land, fix downed aircraft, or sometimes fix other aircraft when they're airborne. Or in this case, most of the time he's been fixing himself when he's airborne because he's taken so much damage. But that's all right. We are not going to hold that against him. But the point is, all of the NPCs we throw out there have some level of interaction. Either they enable Engine Seer Murdoch to do other cool things, or they enable the player characters to fight to a lower structure level, or they enable the player characters to get out of a sticky spot. Now, one of the things that's been kind of interesting is building out the world that these characters are in. So, if you've been following the Taxila Coil, you know it takes place in the Taxila sector, far to the, I guess the term is galactic east in the eastern fringe. But it basically is an area that I said, you know what? Let's build a sandbox. Let's do some things that are grimdark but aren't gothic, because I'm one of those guys that I'm tired of gothic. We've done everything gothic there's to be done in 40K, and we don't need more gothic. So let's do grim and let's do dark. Let's do grim dark. But my God, man, can we fight somewhere that's not a gothic city? So one of the cool parts of all this is it allowed me to kind of build a sandbox they could play in, and we went first to one of the worlds, to Scythiana. So there's a couple different worlds that are in there, and the cool thing with oops, and I opened it in the wrong window, so you guys can't see it. I have this wonderful spinning globe that you guys aren't even looking at. Thank you, Windows. All right, let's close that. Yes. All right. Now I'm going to try to open that with, let's see here. Hey, let's open it with our Photos tool. All right. Drag this over. So rather than being like most adventures, stuck on a gothic world somewhere where it's dark and it's grim and everything sucks, we put them on an ag world. So it's open and airy, and people are growing things, and there's fish in the ocean, and the seas aren't all dead. So yeah, it's part of the 40K universe. There's ag worlds out there, but it was very much a key to get them out of their comfort zone of what they thought grimdark was, because by golly, some grim and some dark stuff has been going on recently. So there have been various questions about the local mechanicum and what they do, their possible enslavement of people younger than they ought to be into soldierdom, and some of the other typical mechanicum things about augmentations and stuff like that, as well as technology in the service of mankind, or is the technology an abominable intellect, and is it actually running things? So some of those things we've been able to put into this grimdark background without it being a hive world, without it being a gothic temple world, something like that. Now, the cool thing is we obviously can draw on all of the different lore and stuff from the Tau. Part of that was the fun part of putting, you can see all the cool fauna and things, putting the orca and the manta in. So those were really fun to pull in 40K standard bad guys and build some stat lines for them, because they weren't in the original Aeronautica Imperialis rules. So I won't say that. Yeah, I know we do need an Aeronautica DCS mod. Yes, we do. If only we knew anyone that was doing DCS. Blue Falcon Hobbies has joined the chat. So the cool thing with taking 40K enemies is it still feels like 40K. It doesn't feel like we're playing some different game here. We're not playing Battlestar Galactica with Aeronautica Imperialis rules. We are playing AI. We're fighting the Tau, and the Tau at a fairly young stage. But we're not doing it on the hive world of whatever Secundus, Primus Secundus Latinus. Yeah, so it's feeling a little bit different. So feel free to get your players out of their comfort zone, and also, along with that, let them kind of shatter stereotypes. So, obviously, Miriam wanted to play Minka Lesk. I can't let her play a named character from the future, so she has to play Minka Lesk's grandmother, Pinka, who is a character that is thoroughly expendable in this sense. But let people also play their vision of 40K. So while she is very much Miriam's character Pinka is very much stock Cadian in that way, cut out cardboard cutout of Cadians. Uh, the character that her husband Rick plays, once again, Engine Seer Murdoch, he is anything but. He's kind of somewhere on the line of techno heresy, but somewhere in the fine line between techno heresy and might as well become an orc the way he runs things. But it allows us to feel out some of the areas of 40K that are not necessarily super Martian, grim, dark, and everybody's running around in a robe. He's kind of sitting over there on the side, tinkering with stuff, trying to break stuff, MacGyvering his way through stealing Xenos technology, and trying not to catch the eye of either his boss, who is Mars Adeptus Mechanicum, or the local Inquisitor. So it gives a little bit of an RPG flair to breaking the rules, doing the things you're not supposed to do, being that thief or that rogue, but doing it in a 40K way. Now then, along the same lines are AWACS crew. To go back to back to the lovely Marauder Princeps. Very 40K and very hilarious. So Connor plays that crew, and he plays out a crew of a Cadian battle captain, lieutenant, who is the main character from there. But he also has, yes, a pilot who is wait for it, a former Kriegsman. Yes, the guy with a shovel. So he has a Kriegsman as his pilot, and he has a Adeptus Mechanicus tech adept on board running all of the electronic systems. So it makes for an interesting interaction, allows him to role play and to role play some pretty funny things that go on, whether during the course of the mission, in the mission briefing, or in the officers club afterwards. It adds for the role playing. So let your players kind of push the edges, pushes the boundaries. Once again, like any role playing game, there's a fine line between being funny and just devolving into stupid jokes. But pretty much I'll say the stereotypes of Kriegsman and Adeptus Mechanicus work well for Connor's characters. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the one thing that we did that was not too expected. The Sea Dragon. All right, so what tells you you're on an ag world any more than giant toothy monsters that are trying to eat you? Unfortunately, episode 1 did not record very well. Maybe we'll have to bring back the Sea Dragon and reprise its role at some point. But this was another get your player characters out of their comfort level. Everyone was expecting on game 1, episode 1, we're going to show up. We're going to face some bad guy flying something. Well, the episode started with them having to fly out to a offshore processing plant and rescue the people off of it as it was undergoing quote-unquote seismic activity. And then the last thing they expected happened. A sea dragon popped out of the water and started trying to eat the Valkyries as they were landing. Sure, all of its stats are just like an airplane or a ground sight. You know, you see it has like a bite that it can do to an adjacent hex. It's got Breath of Sea that is a short-ranged weapon. So yeah, nothing is super long-ranged on this beast. But it gave them something they didn't know how to deal with. So don't be afraid to go out there and totally throw a curveball at your players, knowing that it is your responsibility as the GM to make it fun. Make it fun. Make it narrative, and have an escape valve in case the characters aren't handling it very well. Actually, the player characters handled this one really well. They rolled fairly crappy and kept doing damage, but were not getting enough structure to kill it. So finally, we had to bring in some more aircraft and finish it off. But this was an interesting point because it had already damaged one of the non-player character Valkyries. And so the question became, do I just kill the NPC Valkyrie? What do I do? But we got to a point where everyone was so damaged, we had to bring in the Adeptus Mechanicus to pull people off the platform because there were too many. And then, we used some NPCs kind of as a foil They flew by, being thoroughly incompetent, managed not to shoot the Sea Dragon, but the Sea Dragon tried to grab them out of the sky and actually did a bite attack on one of the fighters. So feel free to have expendable red shirts. We've had a couple of them that we've lost in the course of this adventure. But that's what the NPCs are there for. They're there to stumble across the bad guy, die gloriously in the process of fighting the bad guy, and hopefully be a lesson to the player characters on what they don't want to do. Okay. So that's a lot of the different vehicles and a lot of the different uh, things we added in to add some narrative flair to all of this. The last thing I'll throw out there is if you like writing backstories, if you enjoy, the narrative piece of this, feel free to create stories and background, and to throw things in there that are little bits of flair. So I call them little bits of flair. When we played the previous campaign, I handed out plastic vampire teeth to the orcs as I was paying them in teeth. I handed out ammunition to one of the other orcs as we were paying them in firearms and explosive. I handed a bunch of glued together plastic gemstones because we were paying off some of the Eldar with spirit stones. Things like that are kind of fun, and add a little bit of background to all of this. Now, if I could find it here, and of course, oh, there it is. One of the things I created, and you may or may not have seen it. Let's see, is that on the PDF? See if my PDF wants to load. There we go. Created the Guardsman Guide to the Taxila Sector. So I created a little folding brochure. Thank you, Microsoft publisher, for showing me how to do a folding brochure. That was an intro to the local sector. So I didn't have to spend a lot of time in a very boring way painting what the worlds were like. But it gave me a chance to, with a little bit of humor, talk about the locals, talk about their allies, talk about the enemies out there, heretics and separatists, those dirty, rotten scoundrels, and to make some humorous allusions to things they would run into later, such as one of the lines down here about demographics. You may come into contact with the members of the local populace you find attractive and are pleasing in their conduct. Do not consort with the locals. They will only lead you into heresy and destruction. Yes, reminding them that the Inquisition is always watching. But it's a cool way to add a little bit of flair to everything. The other thing that we did was, or that I did, I should say, was I created a secondary brochure about the leadership of the unit. So, as it's coming up here, I created a Know Your Regimental Leadership brochure, and that was kind of fun because it allowed me to introduce some of the other characters, like the regimental commander, and the, let's see if we can zoom in, the regimental commander, Colonel Sedalzar, Commissar Captor Ferranz, who I laughed as I wrote this. Do not attract his attention, and certainly do not interfere with him in the execution of his duties around the regiment. There's Engineer Majoris Cax, which is our Adeptus Mechanicus's boss. And there's the ever dutiful tech adept Solon. Look at him. Doesn't he look just ever so helpful? And isn't it obvious that behind that augmented eye, there's like zero brain? Yeah, dumb as a box of rocks. Actually, dumb as a box of dead cogitators. That's how I would say it for the Adeptus Mechanicus. But it also got me a chance to introduce some of the NPCs from the local branch of the services there. Whether it was introducing some of the pilots for the Pterodons, some of the Taxila Mechanicum ground crew, or basically the Harbingers, one of the night. One of the premier knight families inside of a knight house, inside House of the Mysticles, that the players have met. So gave me a cool chance to give them a little bit of background without being that game master that bored them describing these things that they could have cared less about. Now they have a brochure, and when something comes up and I mentioned the Harbingers, they open the brochure, they go, oh, those guys. Hey, which guy is which? Hey, you told me this is Adonis. Which one's Adonis? Yeah, the young guy that thinks he looks cool. That's Adonis. Or the first time they met some of the female Taxila Mechanicum ground crew, they were able to ask, you mean she looks like this? I'm like, yes, she looks more human than Mechanicum, in the sense of she has a shapely form and figure. However, she is cold-hearted and glaring at you with a blue augmented eye. so don't mess with her. But anyway, so that gave a little bit of background to each of the characters, made the characters a little bit more relatable. And I hate to say it, yes, this is AI art. I hate AI art. I despise AI art. But as a GM, AI art is the fastest way I can communicate something to my player characters, because as humans, we are visual people. And so when they want to know, oh, so you're telling me that the local PDF, their armor looks different than Imperial flight armor, they now have a picture of one of the COs of one of the squadrons in his, flight armor that doesn't look big and clunky like a 1940s bulletproof vest like the Imperial armor does. But yeah, it's one of those things of yay AI, boo AI. So I don't like AI. I wish I had an artist that could do all this. However, I have yet to find one. Someone knows an artist. Someone is an artist that would love to do this stuff for the Taxila Coil. Message me. We'll talk about it. We're happy to put money in artists' pockets rather than use AI to do all this. All right. So let's talk about a couple other things real quick. The last thing I wanted to cover with the player characters is backstory. So one of the things we haven't done is we really haven't talked about the player characters' backstories a whole lot, because we kind of started in the middle of things, in media res, if you're a literary nerd again. So all the player characters haven't really sat down and talked about their backstories. A little bit of it comes out every time we have an episode where we're at the bar, where we're at the officers club, and people are talking and sharing things and catching up. It gives people a little bit of a chance to expound upon their backstory. But it's one of those things that definitely you should explore. Every GM has their way of doing it. Some like doing flashbacks. Some like doing retrospectives where they pre-brief a specific character to be ready to tell part of their story when it comes to a useful part of the narrative. I don't know which of those I like better. I'll be honest. I'm not a huge fan of in-game flashbacks, but I do like retrospectives when you put somebody either into a emotionally vulnerable state as their character, aka they've had too much to drink, or you put them in a position where their background, their backstory, their what makes their character different suddenly becomes the key to unlocking something. And we've seen that a little bit with Pinka. We've seen that a little bit with Murdoch. Really haven't seen it a whole lot with the other characters, but we might yet. So, okay. The last thing that I will address overall is player character boundaries. And so I know this gets a lot of talk out there on the interwebs, but remember, 40K is grimdark. As a GM, you should never be afraid of telling the story that is 40K. But you have human players who have certain boundaries, and there's certain things they may or may not do. So just because I have a player, Miriam, who, when she plays 40K or plays Heresy, she plays Emperor's Children and plays Chaos and has a Titan adorned with skulls hanging from it. I don't assume that everything that I like in the Grimdark, she necessarily likes in the Grimdark. The same thing goes with her husband, Rick, who I laugh at. I think he tolerates more than just about anyone. But he even has his boundaries. And then Connor, who is like me, is a Grimdark baby. The grimmer, the darker, the better. And if the servo skull that is printing out your daily flight tasking happens to be your great uncle, who was the third ace of Cadia, all the better and more grimdark. But every player character has their boundaries. So definitely, you don't necessarily have to do a session 0. I'm not advocating that. I'm not advocating also having yellow cards, red cards, signs. But talk to your players. Find out, because 40K can go so grimdark so fast, find out what their boundaries are. Find out if there's anything that, they accept as part of the lore, but they really don't want to delve into, or if there's anything that they really do want to delve into, that they as players go, you know what, I want my player character's backstory to be pretty grimdark, and I'll write that up for you, and I have no problem with going out and having to kill my heretic uncle. Other player characters may be like, nope, you know what? I want to just be the average soldier in the Cadian military. I don't need anything bad in my backstory. So I would say take it take your player characters' boundaries very seriously, but you don't have to make a big production out of it. We're not getting any virtue signaling points by saying, "Oh, look at us! Look how virtuous we are," and we are not offending any of our characters. I know I've already offended one of them by having what he interpreted as child soldiers out there when they're not really child soldiers. Sorry, Rick. Uh, but the look of horror on his face as I chose poorly in my words, describing the Taxila Mechanicums outriders, and they're people that fill the role that Iron Striders and others would fill. So when I said they looked younger than the usual age of a Cadian militiaman, I probably should have said they look a lot like White Shields, really young people impressed into service. So they're not child soldiers. Um, but yeah, so take your player character's boundaries serious. That's all I'll say about that. Okay. Uh, I haven't seen any more questions come in, so I don't know if I've totally put everyone to sleep. The intent was to at least talk about the Taxila sector and the Taxila Coil episodes while everyone was taking a Doug vacation, a vacation from Doug. I have to go do some work travel for the next couple of weeks, so we will not be streaming, but we will try to get people to hop on and talk either about the characters or talk about the Taxila Coil itself and the adventure, where they've gone, where they think it's going, and what it's been like to play Aeronautica Imperialis with a role-playing games flair to it. Because it certainly has been different for me as a GM to run this rather than facilitating a standard campaign where I'm more concerned about, just what's the next battle, who's fighting who. Now everyone's on the same side, ostensibly on the same side, I think. But it's been a lot of fun. So anyway, with that, I'll turn it over to the audience, and Brett or Steve, if either of you are still on, which you're probably not. Any questions from anyone out there? We will be getting back together in mid-May, so all the travel ends about then. We will start wrapping up this part of the campaign, the fight against the Tau on Scythiana, and we may be traveling to one of the other worlds in the Taxila sector. So there may be a hook dragging us along that way, and we'll see if the players bite or if the players do what players seem to always do, and they they don't follow the breadcrumbs that you've laid out for them. Um, but that's what player characters do. All right, I'm just typing a little bit in, and I'm terrible because I got my mic right by my keyboard, so I can't type very fast. All right, I'm throwing it out for any other questions before we sign off here. It's been a lot of fun to at least have a quick jump in and discussion. And was hoping that Matt would show up. So, are all my players Imperium? Yes. In this one, they're all Imperial. So the previous campaign that we did, 2 were Orc, 1 was Eldari. So that made for a really interesting campaign. But in this one, they're all Imperial. They're all either members of the 94th Cadian Regiment or attachments thereof. So they're all pilots of some form or fashion attached to the 94th Cadian or part of the 312th Imperial Wing, which was kind of what I specified going into this campaign. I said, guys, love the crazy orc stuff. But it's time to do some stock Imperial things, because it allowed me to at least kind of steer the story a little bit easier without as much pushing the I believe button, as having 2 different orc groups of freebooters working with an Eldari craft world, all working alongside a rogue trader and 2 inquisitors. Yeah, I'm sure that's probably very 40K-ish. That I'm sure Dan Abnett could write a book about that. But there were times that it felt like we were pushing the boundaries of things that should happen in the 40K world. So the other thing to think about, and we talked about it a little bit with Wrath and Glory, is there is an entire Xenos campaign in there. There are Xenos character builds. So if you want to do Xenos things, Wrath and Glory is a great system to do that, and to make each of the Xenos feel a little bit different than their Imperial counterparts. Maybe one of these days we'll have Eldari flyers in this campaign, but today is not that day. How long did it take for folks to make their characters and paint their ships? Okay, so that's kind of a funny one. The ships got painted very fast, and I laughed about that. The characters actually took people longer. And why is that? So our group is pretty diverse. You've got Rick who comes from a role playing game background, has played a lot of different role playing games, and is a war gamer of the 40K and Heresy and Old World kind of stuff. Um, so so for him, rolling a character, old hat, pretty straightforward. Connor, also a diverse gamer, had played a lot of role playing games, runs a lot of role playing games as a GM DM. You know, super super comfortable with an RPG system, but I threw him a curveball by making him a crew. So all of a sudden there was a question of, what do I do? So his airplane was sort of ready. Then I finally got him a printed version of his AWACS, so his characters got done before his aircraft, which we're still waiting to get painted. The new Marauder Princeps should make its appearance here in May. And then poor Miriam. Miriam is a video gamer, then a war gamer, and finally, last of all, an RPGer. So she was not super comfortable rolling up a character. So we walked her through that and walked her through some of the choices. It's also been funny because some of the RPG gates that are innate to us, like taking stock of your XP at the end of every game, looking down and saying, do I finally have enough to buy a skill, buy an upgrade? She's just not used to that. She plays RPGs, video game RPGs, so it's kind of handed to you to automatically do those things. So all of a sudden, she's like, "Hey, wait a minute! How many experience do we have by now? Wait, I have enough. I can do things." And at that point, her husband Rick had already paid for a bunch of skill upgrades and was well on his way to making all of his rolls while she was still rolling like an introductory character. So it was kind of funny. Character creation has been unique for all of them. I think. Whatever rule set you choose, whether you choose Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, whether you choose Wrath and Glory, whether you use Aeronautica V13, you just got to take stock of your players, and are they war gamers first? Are they going to forget to spend their XP? And I did a very bad job as a GM. I was not keeping a good running tally as I should have been. So when people asked me, I suddenly had to do math in public, and it was rather confusing. But be a good GM. Keep a tab on your players and on their experience points, and then be able to to quickly remind them to spend those experience points and do cool things. Okay. Other questions. I'm sure Brett is about questioned out. Brett's like, stop relying on me for questions, dude. I'm on the podcast. I kind of wish I'd gotten Brett to play. We should have played more Aeronautica. We didn't get to play as much as we would have liked. I normally we do warm up games for Aeronautica before we play at Adepticon. So at least after one of the breakfast periods, or after lunch or whatever, we always catch up and we play a little bit of Aeronautica. All right, another one from Brett. Have there been any awards for valorous actions? Yes. So we got an extra XP bonus for initially the Adeptus Mechanicus landing and picking up the Savior Pod or ejection capsules from Pinka's ejection and finding a way to stuff that in the aircraft and fly off without crashing, thankfully. So he got a bonus there, and then Pinka got one for killing the manta, basically being the person who dealt the most damage to it over time, and staying stuck on it like a tick on the back of a dog, and doing that. So other than that, there haven't been a lot of skill-based valorous actions. Now that the players are starting to spend money on skills, they'll be able to use some of the ones that allow you to either transfer damage from a wingman to your aircraft or things like that. And there's always narrative ways that people will get some super cool interactions there and get some XP for doing valorous things and saving their red shirt wingman or saving the all too important transport. But do it not via the standard kinetic means of shooting down all the bad guys. So we'll see, and that's part of being a good GM is put those kind of situations to the player. We have more than once not killed an NPC's aircraft because we wanted there to be flavor to it. So we kind of looked around the room and we all said, normally this airplane would die, right? Okay, we're going to consciously allow it to use the player character rules because it was at a key part of the story. And so I think as the GM, once again, your first duty is to have the players have fun, have them enjoy a narrative. So if the shooting down and the killing of that NPC aircraft would break the narrative, by all means, use the player character damage rules. Now make them escort that limping NPC aircraft. I used the ejection rules, and it was kind of funny. I rolled for all the ejections for all of the aircraft shot down in the previous 2 episodes ago, the episode of Adepticon, the Beast, and in episode, I guess it was episode 7, the all of them survived or limped home except for Pinka's wingman. And I was laughing because I was trying to play this up as well. I'm sorry your wingman got shot down, et cetera, et cetera. And she looked at me and goes, yeah, whatever. He's a red shirt. I'm like, we're not even going to name the guy that got shot down. Lieutenant Bob. All right, Lieutenant Bob, the red shirt, got shot down. Here's a toast to Bob. Okay, move on. So it was kind of funny. I was kind of relieved I didn't have to do a whole backstory on the dead dude who didn't survive the ejection. But yeah, we lost one crew of vultures out there in that game. So your experience may vary. Your player characters may be sappy and want to rescue all their NPCs. Mine were not very. They were kind of grim and dark and really indifferent that they died. Yeah, exactly. Guy. He's going to be Lieutenant Guy. That guy over there. But anyway. All right. With that, it's been a good while. So I'm going to go ahead and tie this all up. Brett, thanks for all the questions. Thanks for everyone who's watching. This will go up on YouTube one of these days when I get around to editing it, as I have to start travel here in a couple days. But thanks everyone for dropping by and chatting and for asking a couple questions. We will see you all in the middle of May for the next episode, full-on adventure of Taxila Coil. But there'll be plenty more little one-off quick discussions coming up over the next couple weeks. Thanks everyone for watching.